Shall I really name names here?
I think you should.
Please.
Okay, this is going to be a shocker. Hold on, folks. Bert Reynolds.
Hollywood is a place where the spotlight shines bright. But what happens behind the scenes often tells a more compelling story than what appears on screen. Throughout decades of stardom, some of the most celebrated names in showbiz have navigated relationships, both personal and professional, that were far from glamorous. For every tearful acceptance speech or memorable movie moment, there's often a tale of tension, ego, and creative clashes hidden in the wings. Today's deep dive takes us beyond the glitz and into the shadows, examining the surprising, difficult, and often controversial experiences of one of America's most beloved actresses, Sally Field. Known for her extraordinary performances and resilience, Field has been refreshingly honest about her past, including the darker moments she faced with certain co-stars. What you're about to hear is based on public interviews, memoir excerpts, and reputable sources. While it's easy to simplify these stories into feuds or grudges, the reality is more nuanced and, in many ways, more human. There's a reason Sally Field's story continues to captivate audiences, not just for her Oscar-winning performances, but for the candid way she's revealed the emotional undercurrents of her personal life, particularly when it comes to her relationships with major Hollywood icons. And few of those relationships were as intense or as fraught as the one she had with Bert Reynolds. At the height of their fame, Sally Field and Bert Reynolds were a golden couple in the public eye. Tabloids couldn't get enough of them, especially after their electric chemistry in Smokey and the Bandit lit up the screen. Audiences saw charisma, humor, and affection. But behind the scenes, something much darker was happening. Field has since opened up about how Reynolds controlled nearly every part of their relationship. He wasn't just a partner. He was, at times, a gatekeeper to her career and even her self-worth. In her memoir, In Pieces, Field doesn't sugarcoat her truth. She pulls back the Hollywood curtain to reveal how Reynolds tried to isolate her from friends and colleagues. He would often criticize her acting choices, making her doubt herself at a time when she was ascending to some of the biggest heights in her career. Imagine winning an Academy Award, one of the highest honors in the industry, and feeling like your partner resents you for it. That was her reality after Norma Ray. While the world celebrated her, the man she was closest to made her feel small. It wasn't just about jealousy. It was about control. Reynolds wanted to mold her into the version of Sally Field that fit his narrative. She said he resented her independence, her ambition, and especially her success. That internal tug-of-war became a source of pain that she carried with her long after the cameras stopped rolling. And yet, Reynolds would later call her the love of his life. That statement, while romantic on the surface, only deepened the complexity of their history. To Field, those words didn't erase the manipulation, the emotional tension, or the way she felt suffocated by the very person who claimed to love her most. One of the most surprising revelations? Field called him a bad on-screen kisser, a jarring statement considering how their chemistry had fueled one of the most iconic movie romances of the era. It was a reminder that even the most convincing love stories on film can mask an entirely different reality when the cameras stop. Their story serves as a cautionary tale about the way power dynamics and control can hide in plain sight, even in relationships that appear perfect. It wasn't about public drama or explosive fights. It was the slow erosion of confidence, the subtle digs, and the undermining of a woman trying to grow into her own power. If the Bert-Reynolds relationship was a storm of control and emotional damage, then what happened with Tommy Lee Jones was more like a chilling silence. When Field worked with Jones on the 1981 film Back Roads, she encountered a completely different challenge: emotional coldness. The chemistry was supposed to be there on screen, but Field was met with a wall of indifference from her co-star. Jones, known for his stoic, hard-edged persona in films, apparently brought that same energy to the set, but without the warmth of performance. Field, who approaches her roles with openness and a desire for connection, found herself constantly shut down. He didn't engage with her. He didn't collaborate. He didn't even really acknowledge her input. And while that kind of behavior might be tolerable in passing, on a film set, where trust, timing, and connection are everything, it became a quiet form of professional rejection. There was no shouting match or dramatic fallout between them, but for Field, the silence spoke volumes. She was working in an environment where emotional connection was critical, and what she got was the cold shoulder. That kind of detachment doesn't just make the work harder. It affects the performance, the energy, and the story being told. And audiences can feel that, even if they don't realize it. This wasn't about bruised egos or clashing temperaments. It was about trying to create emotional intimacy with someone who refused to engage. And for an actress like Field, who built her career on emotional honesty, that disconnect was more than frustrating. It was disheartening. What's powerful about Field's accounts is how she doesn't villainize for the sake of drama. She simply tells the truth, the parts that are hard to say and even harder to hear. Whether it was a relationship filled with manipulation and heartbreak, or a working partnership that felt like being iced out, her stories show the emotional cost of being a woman in a business that often celebrates male dominance and dismisses female vulnerability. In both of these cases, there was no big, scandalous headline that told the whole story. Instead, there were quiet moments of pain, disappointment, and isolation, woven into the glamour of Hollywood. Sally Field didn't just survive those experiences, she emerged from them with a clearer sense of who she was and what she wouldn't tolerate anymore. And that honesty, that courage to speak up even decades later, it's what makes her story unforgettable. Not all of Sally Field's most challenging experiences happened under the blinding spotlight of major motion pictures. Some of the most unsettling moments came when the cameras were rolling for smaller productions, places where you might expect things to be simpler, easier, even more collaborative. But working with Robert Blake proved to be anything but that. Robert Blake, already well known from his role in Beretta, had a reputation for being intense, but what Field encountered went beyond that. She described the atmosphere on set as chaotic, unpredictable to the point of instability. For someone like Field, who came prepared, grounded, and respectful of the process, Blake's erratic behavior became a mental and emotional obstacle course. He wasn't just difficult. He was disruptive in a way that shattered any sense of security for the cast and crew. He would rewrite lines, change scenes on a whim, or derail the flow of a shoot because he suddenly decided things should go another way. There was no conversation, no collaboration, just impulsive shifts that left everyone scrambling. Field talked about how this behavior drained her, creatively and emotionally. It wasn't just about working hard. It was about constantly being on edge, bracing for what might explode next. There's a difference between artistic passion and dangerous volatility. Field found herself caught in a production where control seemed to be slipping away from everyone involved, all due to one actor's refusal to respect the boundaries of a professional set. She never claimed to hate Blake, but the trust simply wasn't there. And without trust, acting, especially in emotionally vulnerable scenes, becomes nearly impossible. It was less about artistic differences and more about psychological survival. The environment was so unstable that she later referred to the experience as a mental battleground. That phrase says everything. It wasn't a creative challenge, it was psychological warfare, with Blake's unpredictability turning the filming process into a daily endurance test. And when the person causing that is your co-star, the emotional fallout lingers long after the cameras shut off. Even earlier in her career, Field faced situations that exposed just how vulnerable women could be in the entertainment industry, especially young women trying to find their footing. During her time on The Flying Nun, a show that catapulted her into the public eye, she encountered Davy Jones, the heartthrob of the Monkees and a teenage idol of the 1960s. To many, Jones was harmless, cheeky, charming, part of a cultural wave that blended music and television into pop royalty. But Field remembers something very different. During a seemingly casual interaction, he made a sexual remark that blindsided her. It wasn't just inappropriate, it was demeaning, delivered in a setting where she should have felt safe and respected. She wasn't just another person at a party. She was a young actress, working hard to be taken seriously, and Jones's comment struck at the heart of that struggle. She later said that the moment left her feeling humiliated and powerless, and that feeling didn't just pass. It stayed with her, a reminder of how easily women could be objectified, even by those seen as harmless icons. The worst part? She felt like she couldn't say anything at the time. That fear of speaking up was so deeply embedded in the industry culture that she swallowed her discomfort, as so many women did. It wasn't about holding a grudge or turning a single moment into a lifelong vendetta. It was about the weight of that moment and how it represented something bigger. A system where men, even well-liked, charming ones, could make women feel small without facing any real consequence. Field's account wasn't about revenge. It was about truth-telling, and in telling it, she gave voice to thousands of women who'd had similar experiences but never felt they had the space or the right to share them. Looking back on both of these stories, the chaos with Robert Blake and the crude encounter with Davy Jones, they may seem vastly different on the surface. One was about emotional chaos and unpredictability on a professional set. The other was a personal violation, brief but cutting. Yet both share a common thread: the erasure of agency. In both cases, Field found herself in environments where her comfort, her dignity, and her process didn't matter as much as someone else's power or whim. What makes these stories resonate is not just their content, but the way Field chose to share them. She didn't sensationalize. She didn't attack. She recounted them with clarity, with honesty, and with the quiet strength of someone who's spent decades reclaiming her voice. These weren't just memories, these were turning points, moments that helped shape her understanding of herself and of the world she was navigating. And through it all, there's a lesson that lingers. Fame doesn't protect you from harm. It doesn't shield you from disrespect or emotional danger. And sometimes, the hardest battles are the ones fought quietly, behind the scenes where no one is watching, but where the wounds still run deep. Sally Field may not have shared the screen with Dustin Hoffman in a major film, but a single audition with him was enough to etch itself into her memory for all the wrong reasons. It was supposed to be just another step in the endless grind of casting calls, a chance to prove herself, to land a role, to do what actors do. But what unfolded was something else entirely. An encounter that exposed not only an individual's ego, but an entire culture of cruelty embedded in the auditioning process. According to Field, Hoffman didn't just test her acting chops. He tested her dignity. During the audition, he interrupted her, made dismissive comments, and took every opportunity to undermine her presence in the room. He mocked her delivery, made it clear he didn't take her seriously, and by her account, even took pride in throwing her off her game. And it worked. She walked out of that room not just without a role, but humiliated, shaken, and deeply unsettled. This wasn't about acting style or constructive critique. It was about power. Hoffman, already a major name, treated her like a novice who didn't belong. Field later said the experience felt less like an audition and more like a takedown. The most jarring part? He allegedly bragged afterwards about intentionally sabotaging her chances, as if destroying someone's opportunity was just another performance. For Field, the experience was a wake-up call, not only about the casting process, but about the kinds of personalities the industry embraced. There was a romantic notion at the time that true artistry required chaos, arrogance, or cruelty. That method acting gave actors permission to blur lines, not just between character and self, but between professionalism and bullying. Field saw through that. She began to separate talent from toxicity, realizing that artistic genius doesn't excuse treating others with disrespect. This moment didn't derail her career. In fact, she went on to prove herself time and again, winning Oscars, leading acclaimed films, and carving a place in Hollywood few women could during that era. But she didn't forget what that room felt like, and she never let herself be blindsided in the same way again. She became more discerning, not only about the roles she accepted, but also about the people she allowed into her creative space. These stories, whether about a chaotic set, a toxic co-star, or an audition gone wrong, are more than isolated memories. They're windows into an industry that operated with very different rules for men and women. For every experience with a difficult actor, there was a much bigger, more insidious problem at play. A system that enabled that behavior and punished anyone who dared to push back. In her memoir and in later interviews, Field made it clear, many of these experiences weren't just personal conflicts. They were systemic failures. The entertainment industry of the 60s, 70s, and even into the 80s was built on a foundation of male power, where being heard as a woman was often a battle in itself. The unwritten rule was clear: keep quiet, endure it, and don't make a scene. Whether it was being dismissed in auditions, sexualized on sets, or expected to tolerate erratic behavior from co-stars, women had to navigate a maze of disrespect just to do their jobs. Field didn't play that game. Or at least, not for long. She began to speak out, not with anger, but with clarity. She didn't accuse for attention. She told the truth because it mattered. When she described the way men like Hoffman treated her, or how she felt silenced in her earliest roles, it was about more than her own story. It was about exposing a culture where this kind of behavior was normalized and even rewarded. Over time, Field's voice became a powerful counter to that old narrative. She redefined what strength looked like in Hollywood, not loud or aggressive, but steady, thoughtful, and honest. She wasn't interested in naming and shaming just for the sake of drama. She wanted people to understand the emotional toll of being unseen, dismissed, and controlled, and the courage it takes to rise above it. So when people look back and ask, did she hate these men? The answer is never that simple. Hate is too small a word. What she felt was more complex: hurt, disillusionment, sometimes fear. In other cases, just disappointment. But most importantly, she felt the weight of a system that too often let men like that thrive, while women had to quietly endure. And yet, she endured, and then some. Not by becoming bitter or playing the same games, but by stepping into her truth with integrity. Sally Field's legacy isn't just about the awards or the iconic roles. It's about surviving a system designed to break people like her and coming out with her voice stronger than ever. Her stories remind us that behind every career like hers, there are battles most people never see. But when those stories finally get told, they shine a light that can't be ignored. In today's digital age, stories like these are often twisted into clickbait. Yes, like our title today. While Field's own words are powerful and detailed, many outlets have exaggerated or misrepresented her statements. Some articles falsely claim she was involved in shouting matches or lifelong vendettas. But Sally Field has rarely stooped to name-calling. Instead, she has chosen to reclaim her story through reflection, not revenge. Yes, she had tense moments. Yes, some actors made her feel unsafe, unseen, or manipulated. But her goal in sharing these stories wasn't to shame anyone. It was to pull back the curtain and show what survival in Hollywood really looked like for women like her. Understanding her experiences requires nuance. It means recognizing the pain without turning it into gossip, and acknowledging her courage without turning her into a victim. Sally Field's career is marked not just by talent, but by bravery. The courage to speak openly about what others kept hidden. The strength to walk away from toxic relationships. And the grace to reflect on even the darkest chapters with wisdom. Whether it was a bitter romance, a demeaning audition, or an emotionally distant co-star, Field never let those experiences define her. Instead, she turned them into fuel for a legacy that continues to inspire. If you found this deep dive as eye-opening as we did, let us know in the comments below. Who surprised you the most? Were there moments in her story that changed how you see Hollywood? And don't forget, like this video, hit that subscribe button and ring the bell so you never miss a behind-the-scenes breakdown of your favorite stars. Your support helps us keep sharing the real stories behind the red carpet. Until next time, stay curious, stay critical, and keep watching.